All right, 9.1, here we go. Estimating the sums and differences of fractions. So the goal is to be able to say, I can use benchmark numbers to estimate the sums and differences of fractions. Now, if you don't know what benchmark numbers are, that's okay. Just a note, it's different than our benchmark, like reading company. Benchmark is a word that means like sort of a target thing, like what you're shooting for. So these numbers we're looking for to get close to certain fractions. So the problem, Ravi estimates that he needs 1.5 gallons of paint. He has 2 cans of paint with the amount of paint shown. Does Ravi have enough paint? So if he has 1 with 2/3, 1 with 7/8, he needs 1.5. Will he have enough? We don't need to actually get the sum. We can just figure out, well, does he have close to enough? Okay, since he's estimating in the first place. So in your notes, we can say if we want to estimate the sum or difference of 2 fractions, it's the first thing, because that's what we're doing. We're estimating the sum. We're combining them to see if he has enough. And then to do that, we can use benchmark numbers. So that's the second place. Second blank. If we want to estimate, we can use benchmark numbers. Again, it's like, what are we close to? We're trying to get close to certain numbers. Now, the numbers we're trying to get close to are 0, 1/2, and 1. So we're going to take a minute and we're going to think about what are some numbers that are close to each of these things, or some fractions. So if we have 0, 1/2, and 1. Now, anything with 0 as the numerator is going to be equal to 0. But that means even if I have like 1/5, that's pretty close to 0/5. So the benchmark that's closest to would be 0. We can have like 1/9, or even like 2/10. Now, there's not a rule about like if it's a 2, it's automatically close to 0. It depends on what the bottom number is. And I'll show you a way to figure that out if you're not sure. 1/2. Think of like 3/6 is exactly 1/2. So if I had something that's close to that, like 2/6 or 4/6, those are both closer to 3/6 than to 0 or 1. If I have, say, like 4/8 is exactly half, so 4/9 is pretty close to half, or 3/8 is pretty close to half. With 1, anything where we have all the pieces, so 4/4 is exactly 1/2. So if I have like 4/5, that's almost the whole thing. Or 8/9, again, that's almost the whole thing. So we can say it's closest to 1. If you're not sure, I would recommend getting a notebook paper. And then say I'm talking about fifths. Count out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. So notice how each of those is a fifth. So then say I was thinking about 3/5. What's that closest to? Well, I could color in 3 of the spots. And then I could ask myself, okay, if 0 is down here, 1 is up here, and 1/2 is right in the middle, 3/5, what's that closest to? Oh, 3/5 is closest to 1/2. And the reason to use a paper is just because it makes sure all the pieces are the same size. Sometimes when we draw it, our piece, like some pieces are small and some pieces are big. So if I do it on a notebook paper, then I can be sure that I'm making all my pieces the same size. Say I was talking about 9/11. I was trying to figure out what that was closest to. Now, you might just think, okay, well, half of 11, I can't do half of 11. Half of 10 is 5. So 5/11 is probably in the middle. But if I really wasn't sure, again, I'm going to count out 11 spaces. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So there's my bar. with its 11 pieces that are all the same size. And I'm going to color in 9 of them, which is all but 2. And then I can say, okay, here's where 0 is. Here's the whole thing. Halfway, well, I figured out it was 5. I could always like count into the middle, or I could say, okay, I think that's halfway. So then I could say, okay, how far away am I? Well, I'm definitely past halfway, right? So it's not going to be 0. Am I closer here, or which one's it closer to? Ah, it's closer to 1. So I would say the benchmark that's closest to is 1. All right? So by rounding, it's a type of rounding to either 0, 1/2, or 1. I can use that to help me estimate. Because you might think, well, where do I put 2/3 on the number line? I put the number line if you want to use it, but I know sometimes it's hard to know, well, where is 2/3 or where are these fractions? That's why drawing it out with the pieces can help. So we have 2/3 is closest to 1/2, and then 7/8 is closest to 1. So if I say, well, 2/3 is 1/2, 7/8 is 1, and we're adding those together, we know it's going to be about 1.5, right? That's what it's going to be closest to. 2/3 is a little more than 1/2. 7/8 is a little smaller than 1. So it's going to be about 1. All right. If you're still, if it's not making sense yet, that's okay. So we round each of them, and then we can add or subtract. That can help us know if we're in the right area when we actually do our problems. All right, so let's say, is 1/2 plus 1/3 5/6? Is that reasonable? Well, 1/2 is exactly 1/2, so we can leave that be. 1/3. Okay, I'm going to pull up here so I can say, okay, out of 3 pieces, 1 out of those, well, it's closest to 1/2. It's kind of hard to tell because it is it's sort of right in between 0 and 1, but it is a little bit, or 0.5, but it is closer to 1/2. If I add those together, I'm going to get 1. Is 5/6 pretty close to 1? Again, you might have a way of thinking about it, which is fine. I'm going to draw it out if we need to do that. There's 5. 1, oop, I needed 6, sorry. There we go. See, easy to just add another piece on. So there's my 5/6. And then if I say 0, 1/2, 1, it is closest to 1. So that is reasonable. Okay? This is about 1/2. This is a little smaller than 1/2, but pretty close. So my answer is a little smaller than 1, because 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1. Let's do some more practice. Again, it takes some familiarity with fractions. If you want me to get out actual fraction bars, I can do that, if it helps to actually hold them in your hands. All right, so let's estimate. 3/4 plus 2/3. Well, 3/4 is one that's exactly halfway in between 1/2 and 1. So then it's sort of up to me how I round it. But if it's asking us if it's greater than or less than 1, well, I know that this, even if I rounded it down to 1/2, 2/3. What's 2/3 closest to? Oh, well, we have thirds here, so let's just fill in another. Still close to 1/2, but a little bit bigger than 1/2. So even if I round them both to 1/2 and I add them, I get 1, but they were both bigger than 1/2, so I know my answer will be bigger than 1. If I visualize it on a number line, I can say, okay, if they're both sort of over here somewhere, and I combine them together, I know I'm going to go past 1 with my answer. Here we have 3/5 plus 1/4. Okay, well, 3/5, you might know, oh, 2.5 is half of 5. So 3/5 is going to be pretty close to a half, but a little bit bigger. If we want to visualize that. Okay, I can say 1, 2, 3/5. Right? That's really close to a half, but a little bit bigger. The other one was a 1/4. So that's right in between 0 and a half. So let's think about it. So if I have something a little bit bigger than a half, and then something that's less than a half, it's probably going to be less than 1, because this was about a half. That was about a half, but this one was definitely smaller, like a chunk smaller. This one was only a little bit bigger, so that's not going to be enough to get me past 1. All right. Sorry, I was just trying to find a good one. All right, let's look at this. Let's just say, let's estimate what will the answer to this be. So round them and then add them. All right, did you get it? Hopefully you rounded 3/10 to 1/2, because it's in between 0 and a half, but it is closer to a half, right? It's closer to 5/10 versus 0/10. 4/5 is going to be closer to 1. So if I add those together, a good estimate is 1.5. Definitely bigger than 1. And 1.5 is a pretty good estimate. All right. Ooh, let's do one with subtracting. So if I have 3/4 minus 3/8, is 2/3 a reasonable estimate for that? Go ahead and choose. All right, well, 3/4 is one of those ones that I could either round to 1/2 or to 1. So say I rounded it to 1. 3/8 is pretty close to a half. And if I subtract those, I get a half. But this one was like a chunk less than 1. This one is just a little bit less than a half. And this one is bigger than a half. So I actually think my answer would be smaller than 1/2. And 2/3 is bigger than a half. So it's not a terrible estimate, 2/3. But it's not like the best one, if that makes sense. I'm happy to help if you're still like estimating. What does that even mean? Benchmark, blah. So just ask, and good luck on your practice.